You be the judge. Was this a psychotic break, or is there something more? Growing up, Colton Louder was a joy to be around. He was always goofing off and making people smile, and he had a really infectious laugh. But secretly, he was depressed and began self-medicating at a very young age. By the time he was 18, he was a full-fledged addict, and by the time he was 25, he was in jail on a life sentence for murdering his uncle over a related dispute. Colton's actions had a profound impact on his family, but none more so than on his twin sister, Kaylin. She had known about his pain even when he was putting on that facade of being happy and bubbly and outgoing, and she had reached out to him and tried to help him, but she could never get through to him, and when he was ultimately convicted, it was crushing to her. She felt like she couldn't help someone who was really vulnerable. But instead of just feeling bad about this, she took her sadness about her brother and watching him spiral and turned that into a laser focus on helping other vulnerable people that were struggling with addiction and depression to try to help them before they end up like her brother. And eventually she would get her degree in social work from Utah State. But despite Kaylin's best intentions to want to help as many people as she could, she found it very difficult to find work in her field, and it wasn't uncommon for her to have fairly long stretches of unemployment. And it was during one of those long stretches in 2014 that Kaylin's life rapidly fell apart, and it left everybody who knew her thinking, what just happened? On September 26, 2014, a little after 9 p.m., Kaylin calls 911. She reported that there was this huge, brutal fight taking place in her condo's clubhouse. Basically, it was like a restaurant where you could rent it out in the first floor of this condo complex. And she said it was getting out of hand and police needed to come over here and stop it before someone got hurt. The police asked her if weapons were involved. Were people using weapons in this fight? And Kaylin says yes. Guns. But when police rush to the scene, bracing for the worst, they discover that it's just a docile wedding reception happening inside of this clubhouse, and not one person in there reported any altercation happening. They were like, we're being pretty quiet. I don't know where she would have got that from. One guest would tell police that they had lit off a single firecracker, but they showed them what they had used, and they were these little tiny cheap things that made almost no noise. So it is possible that Kaylin could have mistaken that for a gunshot, but it does seem highly unlikely. Police leave, and then 1 hour later, Kaylin calls 911 again, but she immediately hangs up as soon as an operator has actually answered the phone. And the operator calls the number back, and Kaylin picks the phone up, but she's not really speaking. She's mumbling, she sounds confused, and the operator said, hey, you tried to call 911 a minute ago. Is everything okay? Can you tell me where you are? And Kaylin would have a really hard time giving her address to the police. It was like she couldn't remember her address. At some point she says, my roommate thinks I'm delusional and paranoid, but I'm not. Kaylin eventually kind of calmed down and said she was sorry for calling 911, and the operator said okay, and they hung up, and that was the end of the call. The next morning, Kaylin calls 911 for a third time in 24 hours. This time, she's frantic. While she's on the phone with the operator, she's periodically screaming at these two people that are apparently robbing her apartment to get the F out of here, get out of my apartment, you can't be here. And the operator is trying to get more information out of Kaylin, but Kaylin is very distressed. She can barely communicate with the operator. She's half crying, and the operator tells her, can you leave? Can you go somewhere safe? And Kaylin says, no, there's only one way out. This is a small apartment. I can't go past them. And the operator tells them that police are on their way. Just stay in your bedroom. Don't go anywhere. And so while Kaylin is huddled in her bedroom and the dispatcher is still on the line listening, you hear Kaylin's roommate, Carol, walk into her bedroom and very calmly say, Kaylin, what's going on? And Kaylin's like, Carol, get over here. You gotta lock the door. Get in here. There's two people in here. They're robbing us. They're out there. They're in the other room. And Carol's like, no, there's no one here. The front door's locked. Kaylin suddenly sounds really confused, and she says, well, I can't explain that, but they must have been in here because I heard them. They must have had a key, and that's how they got in, and that's how they got out. And right at that moment, the responding officers show up, and there was no sign of a break-in. Nothing had been taken. It really looked like nothing had happened unless someone really did have a key. At this point, Kaylin was very embarrassed. She apologized to the officers. She apologized to her roommate, and she ended up calling her mom and saying, I'm I'm mortified. I can't believe I just called 911 3 different times and nothing came of any of these calls. Like, I feel so embarrassed about it. And her mom, being a good mom, told her, you know what, don't worry about it. No one got hurt in the process, so it's all good. And so Kaylin moves past it, and on the call with her mom, she starts talking about what she's going to do that day. She says, well, I'm looking to update my resume and submit it to a couple different job openings, and I also want to clean up my apartment. And so they hang up the phone and everything seems normal again. But at about 5:45 p.m. that night, Kaylin, along with her beloved little dog named Phyllis that apparently she took everywhere with her, were seen exiting the condo and walking out to the parking lot behind their building. Kaylin was barefoot, was only wearing a tank top and shorts, despite the fact that it was cold and raining. And as soon as she puts her dog down, because she was holding her dog in her arm, Kaylin begins having this totally animated discussion, except there's no one there for her to be talking to. About 15 minutes later, she and her dog turn around and walk back towards the condo complex out of view of a camera, but residents would say they saw her crying and going up to a gate that lets you back into the condo, and she apparently couldn't open it, and as she's standing there struggling, she suddenly stops, puts her dog down, turns, and starts running away. And the camera footage we have of her is only when she's back in the parking lot, but she's running away still, and the dog is nowhere to be found. Her beloved dog, she's abandoned, she's got no phone, no wallet, and nobody knows where she's going. Later that night, when Kaylin's family could not get in touch with her, because of all the weirdness around those 911 calls, her family just had a bad feeling about it, and so they filed an official missing person report that night. When police arrived at the condo complex, the first thing they did is they reviewed the security footage. And they already knew about her 3 911 calls that had happened within 24 hours, and all of them had been for unfounded reasons. And they see Kaylin on camera, barefoot in a tank top and shorts in the rain, and she's having this animated discussion with nobody before running around and running away. And so police go to Kaylin's family and they say, does your daughter have a problem? Is she mentally ill? And her family tells the police, no, she's got no history of mental illness. She definitely does not have a addiction because of what happened to her brother, and they explain what happened with Colton and how that had a tremendous impact on her, and how that had actually sent her on a course to help people with mental illness or people who are fighting against addiction or depression. And they explained how she was just really well adjusted and everything seemed okay until these 911 calls started, and now this. So this huge search is launched between the police and volunteers, and actually the Louder family even hired some private investigators to help them look for Kaylin. But days turned into weeks and there was no leads, no one knew where she was. She had just vanished. Then on December 1st, 10 weeks after she went missing, city workers were inspecting drainage pipes down near the Jordan River, which was a river that went by her apartment, and they discovered behind some plants a body that was half submerged, and it would turn out to be Kaylin's. They pull her out of the water and no cause of death could be accurately determined because of how long she had been in the water for. It looked like she had been in there for probably all of the 10 weeks she had been missing. They were able to determine that there were no in her system and there was no water in her lungs, which meant she didn't drown. Her body was found 5 miles from where her apartment was, and so initial speculation was she must have gotten hurt and fallen into this river and drifted the 5 miles downstream to where she was found. But they looked at that section of the river between her apartment and where she was found, and the water was simply too shallow and windy, and it would not have been possible for a human body to travel that distance. Which means almost immediately after she ran off screen on the security footage, she covered those 5 miles, wound up at that section of the Jordan River, died, and then fell in the water, or fell in the water and then died, but not via drowning. The police officially ruled Kaylin's death an accident, but her family disagrees. They say if you look really closely at the security footage right before she runs away, it looks like she's terrified. More specifically, it looks like she's terrified of someone we can't see on camera. When she's having that animated discussion where it looks like she's talking to no one, further feeding the idea that she had kind of lost it, well, there's this huge rock to the right in the video that kind of obscures our view, and behind that is this huge forest. And it is theoretically possible that someone could be back there that we can't see. But no matter what, her family believes that whatever she was doing in her final moments on camera is the key to understanding why she ran off and ultimately died. So you be the judge. Was this a psychotic break, or is there something more?